Again, I want to thank you all for attending. My name is Carlton Martin, the pro bono director of the Law Center. And this is our part 4 of the HALT think tank. When we started the think tank, or when we were thinking about HALT, the Homelessness Action Legal Team, we wanted to figure out ways to engage our volunteers and people who support this work. And this think tank is intended to be just that, to serve as just that, where we can come together, present this information and really educate those that are outside of our organization, those who are not as familiar with the issues, educate them about that, spread awareness so that they can feel, so you all can feel more comfortable with stepping in and taking action on our various pro bono projects and policy initiatives. And then also, it's an opportunity for us to hear from you, because we do not pretend that we know everything. So it's always good to put all of our heads together, because it's always better than one. Last year, we focused on criminalization issues, particularly with the Cicero Institute. The Cicero Institute wasn't defeated. All right, they still exist, but a lot of our advocacy has been effective, where we were able to help to strike down some Cicero policies in various states, but also just to make noise, raise awareness, and just be loud enough to have an impact to where their initiatives are opposed. And so this year is the appropriate time to focus, to transition our focus onto the issue of youth homelessness. Now, selfishly, I think our law center has been in the process of developing a great group of advocates to form our youth homelessness team, and you're going to hear from them today. And the first person you're going to hear from is a leader of that group, Katie Scott. And before we get into the why youth homelessness, there's all types of stats and statistics they're going to get into and cover, but when you talk about homelessness in general, right, and you see it should spark all of us to want to do something to change it, to end it, to alleviate it. But when you see, it's one thing to see a grown, adult male, an adult female, an adult person, non-binary, whatever, whoever you see, a person who's an adult. It's another thing when it's a child or a youth and they're unaccompanied and they don't have a place to go. Think about where you were when you were 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 years old, right? By no means, most of us were not in position to be able to take care of ourselves. We had somewhere to go that was warm, to sleep, to rest our head, to eat, and to have the quality of life that we should have. So when you see young people on the streets, in shelters, with no home, nowhere to go, know that that's a failure on society, and we're here to try to work to correct that failure and to provide support to these children who need our support. So with that being said, I want to kick it off to Katie, so we're the team. You can hear from the team and talk about the issues in more depth. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Carlton. And thanks for the opportunity to bring this issue to the HALT think tank. We're really excited that this is something that folks are going to focus on this year. I'm just going to briefly introduce our team for now. You're going to hear from everyone, so you'll get a chance to learn a little bit more about them as we go through each section. But we have on our team Jeremy Penn, who is our youth homelessness attorney. There's me, who is our youth homelessness director, Katie Scott, John Saloy, who is our youth housing and shelter attorney, and Erica Lopez, who's our communications associate. One thing we do always encourage on our team, we think that our sort of unique perspectives and backgrounds are one of our biggest strengths. And so I'll just share briefly sort of, how I came to this work. I was very privileged to grow up without housing instability. I was a white kid growing up with other white kids in the suburbs, pretty unaware of a lot of the issues that other people faced in society. And then I went to college at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. And just by way of some professor mentors and some groups that I was involved with, really got involved in issues around rural poverty and homelessness. Um, Definitely an experience where the veil was lifted, completely sort of changed my perspective, my politics. And from that point forward, I was determined to be involved in this work and felt that, becoming an attorney was the best way to affect change. Um, you know, I still feel like being an attorney does give us great opportunities to affect change. I'm here at the law center because I got a little tired of trying to do that via individual cases. I spent many years in Seattle representing youth and young adults who are homeless. I also worked with folks who were receiving state disability benefits, doing representation and administrative hearings on that. So it got to the point where I realized I wanted to have a chance to zoom out and start to look at these systems and from a broader perspective to try to figure out what it would actually take to end homelessness. As Carlton mentioned, there's a lot of data around youth homelessness. That's pretty shocking. I think one of the sort of main statistics that our friends at Cheap and Hall have, sort of uncovered is that 1 in 10 youth between the ages of 18 to 25 have experienced homelessness. And that could be, I think if the breakdown was like about 75% either unsheltered or in like youth shelter programs, another 25% couch surfing, doubling up, staying in situations that are not particularly stable or safe. And then that at least 1 in 30 youth between the ages of 13 to 17 experience homelessness every year. I think another piece of this puzzle is just the disparate impact of homelessness. Black youth face an 83% increased chance of becoming homeless. Hispanic youth face a 33% increased chance of becoming homeless. Those in the LGBTQ community face a 50% increased chance of becoming homeless. So, this is not only an issue, I think, as Carlton mentioned, it's like a failure of our systems. It's also makes it plain sort of the elements of oppression that have been within our systems and that we still have a long way to go to have an equitable system around housing and homelessness. Another thing I think Carlton mentioned is just, oftentimes the same systems that are failing youth are the same systems that are failing our adult homelessness population. But I think an interesting piece of this is that it's been found that children who experience homelessness are 50% more likely to be homeless as adults. This is a statistic that I've always sort of said, like, if we solve youth homelessness, we are on our way towards solving homelessness in general, because this is a huge chunk of the problem is the fact that we allow youth homelessness to exist and it continues to turn into chronic homelessness, homelessness and instability for adults as well. Another piece of this isn't our particular expertise here at the Law Center. National Network for Youth does a lot of work around this. But some of the statistics that they have found is that 1 in 3 teens on the street will be faced with the choice of sex work within 48 hours of leaving home. This obviously can lead to issues of human trafficking, which is a big problem amongst especially the younger youth who are unaccompanied on the street. So, of course, the question often is like, how did we get here? How does this problem even happen? We've got some information and data about that. Family violence is a huge issue. Studies found that nearly 80% of unhoused youth report experiencing multiple instances of childhood abuse. not always connected to that, but sometimes as family conflict. There could be conflict around culture or religion, not accepting someone's sexual orientation or gender identity, leading to a child essentially being thrown out of the home. General teenager parent conflict around rules or around mental health and substance use issues. Um, you know, I always say it's like a teenager's job is to differentiate from their family of origin. Like that is their developmental job. It is not something that a teenager can necessarily help or prevent. And so when families are not prepared and sort of understanding and have the support to be able to support their teenager through that time as a teenager is sort of doing their job, their developmental job, that is why I think this is such a sensitive time and where the risk of homelessness really increases, once a child is hitting those teenage years. I want to talk a little bit about sort of, health, mental health, substance abuse problems. I think I always want to be very sensitive to stereotypes about homelessness, that it's somehow always connected to substance use or mental health. But it is something that I do want to point out, especially for young people, is that oftentimes some of the more some of the more serious mental health disorders, such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, it can manifest for the first time in teen years. And again, it can be something that if a family is not aware of it and does not have access to the appropriate, treatment support systems, it can lead to a breakdown of that family structure. There's also the issue of untreated mental health or substance use of a parent that can create dysfunction and conflict within a family and a breakdown of the family structure and the housing situation for the family. I think that, that's another piece of, again, it's our systems, right? Like it can be difficult even for someone with health insurance to get the mental health treatment that they need. It can be difficult for someone who has all the resources in the world to get the substance use treatment that they need. Especially so for families that might be living with housing instability, in poverty, things like that. Finally, just housing and income issues. Some youth report leaving home because there is literally no room in their house, because the family is couch surfing and maybe the people that they're staying with don't want to have teenagers in the house. Maybe the shelter or housing program, they're not going to allow teenage boys to be there. Just all kinds of issues around just housing and income itself. And then finally, just family separation. Many youth that, we've all worked with over the years are homeless because their parents or caregivers are incarcerated, because their parents or caregivers are deported, or because they have died. This, of course, with the, pandemic, this was, that last reason is an increasing reason that youth are homeless, because they literally have no caregivers left. Okay, so we are going to switch away from causes and start talking a little bit about potential solutions. I'm going to kick this section off, and then I'm going to pass it to my coworker, Jeremy, to take us through some of this information. But one of our main projects at the Law Center is the State Index on Youth Homelessness. And the State Index on Youth Homelessness is essentially a website that provides a variety of resources related to the legislative state of youth homelessness across the United States and eventually the US territories. We've done this index for several years. This is the first year that we're sort of calling it Index 2.0. And that's because, and Jeremy will kind of explain how we got there, but essentially we're making the shift to focus the index primarily on housing policy, accessing, affording, and maintaining safe and habitable housing, free from discrimination, and with additional supports and resources for youth who want them. And then we also continue to focus on systems that can help prevent or systems that can cause homelessness. So, kind of our goals with the state index is to remove barriers and provide resources, expand autonomy and shift power for youth, undermine systems of oppression that youth might experience, and then prevent and end youth homelessness. And with that, I think I'm going to just briefly do this slide as well, and then I will pass it on to Jeremy. So part of how we sort of create the sort of policies or figure out the policies that we're going to track on the state index, that this year was actually done via a series of focus groups with youth and young adults. We organized 7 focus groups. Each group focused on a different sort of identity or interaction with an oppressive system. So it might be like youth who have involved, like systems involved youth, youth who have experienced family violence. We asked open-ended questions sort of related to the theme of each focus group and tried to capture what participants experienced while navigating homelessness systems. From there, we began drafting our new metrics, like literally often taking like what a youth had said and trying to figure out like what was the corresponding policy metric that would have, solved that problem for that young person. And then this is where pro bono comes in. We have a team of attorneys from Baker Donaldson that help us research the relevant statutes, regulations, and policies across all 50 states and DC to figure out where states currently stand according to the policy metrics. And we'll go over what some of those metrics are in a bit later. And then I think I might have included here, oh yeah, some of the common themes from the focus groups were accessing and maintaining safe and habitable housing, experiencing discrimination in housing and services, the detrimental effect on homelessness and poverty on mental health, and then the additional trauma of navigating nonprofit and government systems that are kind of layered on top of the experience of being homeless. I did include some of the information we got from the youth in our groups. I think it's just important to hear directly from what young people are saying. And I think what was really maybe not surprising to us, but what became really clear when we sort of analyzed the data from the focus groups was just the fact that so many common threads and themes ran through them, even though it was youth coming from a variety of different backgrounds and identities. Okay, so I think now I can officially pass it over to my colleague, Jeremy Penn.
Thank you, Katie. And it's really a pleasure to be here with all of you today, running through the state index with you all. Part of the work that we did over the last year for the state index was fleshing out what our youth team theory of change was, right? How are we going to make a difference through our work? And we developed this after our focus groups with young people last year and drove it down into sort of 4 key principles for our theory of change. And the first is that impoverishment and oppression drive youth homelessness. Because these systems work to prop each other up, we have to get rid of all of them in order to get rid of any one of them. The second is that youth homelessness is a housing problem, and solving it will require the decommodification of most housing, the construction of new housing, and the upkeep of the existing housing stock that we have. Third, that effective advocacy needs to diminish and not strengthen the systems that cause youth homelessness. And fourth, that our laws need to balance young people's need for care with acknowledgement of their personhood and respect for their autonomy. I don't actually know who's in control of slides, but next slide. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so that's our theory of change. And we have taken that with the policy ideas we gleaned from our focus groups and funneled them into a new scoring system. I want to specifically thank Away Home America and the Movement Advancement Project. Away Home America's New Deal to End Youth Homelessness was a huge inspiration for us in our new scoring system for the new state index, as was the Movement Advancement Project's equality maps, where they track LGBTQ-related metrics around the country. And so I'm actually going to work us bottom to top here on this lovely inverted pyramid. So our scoring system has changed. Our old method was some metrics were scored on a scale of 4 points if they were considered important, and most were scored on 1, and it was kind of ad hoc, and it was sort of just the way it had been done for a number of years. And we wanted to put a bit of rigor into this, and we also wanted to account for the fact that some metrics, some policies on the books cause harm, and the absence of them shouldn't be positive points, but rather the presence of them should be negative points. And so starting with the worst of the worst, we have -1 point is violent. And these are for policies that cause harm to unhoused young people, and the policies themselves are malicious, right? There's an intent behind them. A good example of policies like these are the wave of anti-trans legislation that we've seen targeting folks over the last couple years. Those are pieces of violent legislation. A step up from that is harmful policy, and that's policy that causes harm to unhoused young people, but does not necessarily have a maliciousness or an intent to it. And then a step up from that is status quo. And when you see that on our website, it means that the policy does not reduce harm to unhoused young people, or in some cases, it means that there's no law found, right? There's no law on the books that we've been able to find for a particular jurisdiction. And so that's 0 points. A half step up from there is harm reduction for plus 0.5 points. And this is when a policy reduces harm to unhoused young people if it's effectively implemented, but the policy reinforces the systems that cause youth homelessness, right? Thinking back to the previous slide and our theory of change, truly ending youth homelessness will mean undoing the systems that are causing youth homelessness. So if we have a policy that's reinforcing them, it's never actually going to effectively end youth homelessness, right? And so that's where the next step comes in, reformist. Policies that fall into this category are worth a full point. These are policies that reduce youth homelessness if they're effectively implemented, but the policy still relies on systems that cause youth homelessness. And so we're getting close, but we're not quite there to policies that will actually do something to undermine root causes and to address root causes. And then we hit transformative edge. Policies that fall into this category are policies that undermine the systems that cause youth homelessness, but don't directly prevent or end youth homelessness themselves. So they're undermining root causes, they're working to end youth homelessness, but they don't get us all the way there. And then our last category is transformative, right? And this is a full 2 points. And these are things like an enforceable right to housing in the jurisdiction. These are policies that will prevent or end youth homelessness, whether by themselves or in concert with other policies, if they're effectively implemented. And so these are like the cream of the crop. These are policies that, if they are implemented, will make a real dent. And so I'm also excited to focus in on language that I was using as I was going through these, which is if effectively implemented. Something that our team is really excited about is that we don't just want to be tracking bills and laws in legislatures and codes. What we're really excited for in this new iteration of the state index is once we start tracking implementation on the ground, right? What's happening when these laws make it onto the books, and all of a sudden there's an executive branch that has to start putting them into action. There are cases about these laws and policies happening in the courts, like what's happening on the ground. And so we're really excited to see what happens once we get to that step of this equation, right? What is happening with these policies in the real world and not just tracking them as pieces of paper. And with that, I will turn it back over to Katie, who I believe is going to be doing a walkthrough of the website itself.
Oh, I realized my video is off. All right. Thank you, Jeremy. I really appreciate that. And this is just going to be a brief, sort of example of some of the policies that we track. Please take, time to explore the state index website on your own if you can. There's lots of really great stuff here. But I did want to just kind of give you a sense of like, when we're talking about the various policies, what are we talking about when we think transformative versus harm reduction? This, front page, when you go to our policy page, this is sort of just showing like the overall score that states have when we add all of the policies together. I think the highest score we have right now is like 45. So as they should, all states are. Oh,
Sorry,
can you
I
not
don't
see the website?
I don't see the website. I'm still seeing
Oh,
the
no. Okay. Darn it. All right. Hold on a second. Let me reshare with the website.
Please state those questions. Don't hold on to them. Let them fly.
Just when I think I know how to use Zoom. Okay. So I think this is just, again, like overall what states are scoring on our, when we add up all the policies that we score. The highest score I think we have is 45, which is a failing score, as it should be, because no states at this point do not have any youth homelessness. So we would expect to see lower scores. But I think, when we came through, like just the sheer number of states that actually have negative scores, is pretty concerning. And so that is something that, became really clear once we started looking at the policies. So when we are on the state index website, one thing that you can do is search by policy metric. And there's a ton here, so it's kind of hard to you can just do it by scrolling through and getting a sense of what is there. One way that you can explore is by looking at our various categories. So we have things like accessibility of housing, policies that might be anti-oppressive, policies around autonomy. And that's one, for instance, that's really important for unhoused minors, because one thing that we hear over and over is that oftentimes young people are coming into the youth homelessness system in their state and are basically told that they have to wait till they're 18 to get access to any housing or services because they do not have capacity to sort of consent on their own to housing or to services. And so, one thing that we track, for instance, obtaining a government ID without parental consent, obtaining an ID is often the first step towards being able to access any other kinds of services, to be able to apply for housing programs, be able to apply for, benefits, things like that. And so one of the things we track, this is a metric where our max score is essentially reformist, because, requiring youth to have an ID to get services, that's definitely depending on our current structures and systems. But at least it is something that if a jurisdiction makes it easy, they explicitly provide access to an ID card for youth without parental consent, so that a youth can access what they need, that is something that will, score a point. We also score harm reduction here, where at least young people can get access to a birth certificate without parental consent, and then the rest at this point are no law found. This is something where if a state specifically blocked youth receiving access to an ID, we would score it as a negative. The other thing I'll just point out quickly here, because I don't want to take too much time on this section so I can pass it on to John, is our bibliography. And that's where you can essentially find all the information, citations to the law. This one in particular, we are lucky that we have several partners that track some of these laws so that we don't have to track all 100 plus of them. And so Schoolhouse Connection is one of our partners. They track state laws on vital records. And so you're able to go and just see here, what the law is and where to find it. So that's just a brief example of, our state index and some of the policies that we're tracking. I think I'll just pause for a minute in case there are any questions on the state index. And if not, then I will pass it on to John. And I'll reshare my screen here. So just give me a second.
Okay, maybe I'll just start, Katie. So I just introduce myself.
Yeah.
My name's John Salois. I'm the youth shelter and housing attorney here. And so the issue that I've been grappling with since I've been at the Law Center now is what are the rights of youth in shelter and other housing programs? So what does that mean? So what happens if a youth is terminated from shelter, right? So is there a process? What kind of process? What does an agency owe a youth to a youth who's been terminated from services? And then just as a clarifying point, so when we're talking about housing programs, where sometimes I use the word shelter as a euphemism for all housing programs, but really we're talking about emergency shelter for youth minors, youth up to age 24. We're talking about transitional living programs, maternity group home programs for parenting youth, youth aging out of foster care. It's a whole myriad of different kinds of programs. So I'm just going to talk about a case example first really quickly, just to sort of, because this issue was really crystallized for me when I was practicing. So just a little bit about me. I've been practicing a youth attorney for well over 15 years now. So before coming to the Law Center, I was working in Washington State, and I met this young mom. She was about 20 years old. She had a young son. She had a partner. So, and she was living in emergency shelter, and then she moved on to transitional living programs. And then she was given a grant really by the same service provider that was serving her really, right? So, and then a personality conflict happened, and her grant was just terminated. And by the time she got to me, got to our services, she was 2 months in arrears on her rent. She was really traumatized by the prospect of becoming homeless again. And so it's really, this issue just crystallized the issue for me that someone's grant can just be terminated without notice, without process, without anything. So we eventually got to a good solution for her, but it took a long time and with a lot of trauma. So that said, so again, what are the due process rights of youth who are in shelter and other supportive housing? The answer is it depends on the funding stream, which is, I didn't know at the time, but now I do because I've been grappling with this research for a while. So up on the screen right now is the HALT Act. That is really the most important piece of legislation for homelessness in our country, dealing with shelters and housing, things like that. So the HALT Act. And the HALT Act deals with much more than just youth homelessness, but there are a couple of issues that were changed in 2009 for youth. So anyways, the HALT Act was passed in May 2009. It was reauthorized the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act with some substantial changes. But so some of the things it did basically is it consolidated all of the grants programs from HUD into two massive pots of streams for the Continuum of Care funds and the Emergency Solutions Grant funds. So that's the two massive pots of streams of funding. And so the Continuum of Care basically is more of a community-wide effort to try and end homelessness. And the Emergency Solutions Grants programs are more what your standard emergency shelters, rapid rehousing, those kinds of grants. And really, the goal was to streamline access to housing and to rapidly house people. Another thing it did is it sort of changed the definition of homelessness, which affected youth in two really significant ways. So it did two different things for youth. It redefined what the age youth are under the Act to include up to the age of 25 years old. So before 2009, homeless youth, youth experiencing homelessness, were really defined under these federal statutes as up to 18 years old. This changed that, and was really important. So it was HUD's goal to adequately address the unique needs of transition age youth by redefining the definition of youth and including youth exiting foster care systems into permanent housing. So that was the first change. The second change was that the HALT Act said unaccompanied youth under 25 years of age or families with children and youth who do not otherwise qualify as homeless under this definition are eligible as long as they, and this is sort of a confusing part of this. So as long as a youth who's experiencing homelessness is eligible under another statute, which there are like 7 other statutes, really the most important one here is McKinney-Vento, because that affects a lot of youth who are homeless in schools. So as long as you qualify or are eligible under those statutes, you can get services under the Continuum of Care and the Emergency Solutions Grants programs. Okay, so all that to say, what does the HALT Act? Yeah, you can go to the next one even. So what does the HALT Act say, or really so basically HALT Act was passed 2009, and then there was promulgated rules for the Continuum of Care and for Emergency Solutions Grants program. And so what do those what do those regs say about termination of assistance to all persons, but in our case here for our purposes for youth? So in general, basically, if a program participant violates program requirements, the service provider may terminate the assistance in accordance with a formal process established by the service provider that recognizes the rights of the individuals affected. So basically, there is a process, and it's supposed to be formal, but it's by the service provider. It's not another agency or another government actor. This is the service provider. So, but the service provider must exercise judgment and examine all extenuating circumstances in determining when violations warrant terminations, so that a program participant's assistance is terminated only in the most severe cases. So what should the formal process require? It should require three different, it's basically this minimal idea of due process. You can go to the next slide, Katie, actually. So it's what it is written notice to the program participant containing a clear statement of the reasons for their termination, a review of the decision in which the program participant is given the opportunity to present written and oral objections for a person other than the person who made that decision, and then prompt written notice of the final decision to the program participant. And then the last thing is if termination was successful, it does not bar a participant from getting services in the future. So that's what the continuum of so just to clarify, that was the Emergency Solutions Grants regs, but they're COC and ESG. They're substantially similar. So I just for simplification reasons, I went with those. So there are many youth who are covered under those programs, but as you can see the slide here, the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act is really, this is the most youth who are experiencing homelessness, if they're getting federal assistance or federal funds to be housed, is from the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act. And so I'm going to go over that just briefly. I don't want to take up too much time here. It can be a little dry, this stuff. So anyways, the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act was originally passed in 1974. It's been amended several times since its enactment. And the last time it was in 2008, and there was final rules promulgated in 2017 that had significant changes significant changes. So, okay, so it provides federal funding to emergency shelters, transitional living programs, and other housing programs targeted towards youth and young adults. And it provides funding, provides the basis for the Runaway and Homeless Youth Program and the Family and Youth Services Bureau as part of the Department of Health and Human Services. So basically, there's the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act created the Runaway and Homeless Youth Program and the Family Youth Services Bureau, which oversees all of the grantees, which are all around the country. So, and there's hundreds and hundreds of them. And that's one of their jobs, is to monitor these grantees. So, where does that money go? It goes to, most of this money goes to the Basic Center program. So a Basic Center program is provides temporary shelter for minors experiencing homelessness. You can go to the next slide now, Katie, sorry. It provides temporary shelter for minors experiencing homelessness up to 21 days with counseling, therapeutic, and family interventions, and access to educational services. So that's basically for minors up to your 18th birthday. And the basic idea here is family reunification, but that does not always occur. But that's mainly for minors up to their 18th birthday. The next program is what transitional living programs. So it provides longer term housing, which can include host family homes, group homes, supervised apartments, owned or operated by the agency for transition age youth 16 to 22 years old with supportive services, excuse me. And that includes maternity group homes for pregnant and parenting youth. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. So all that to say, what are the termination procedures for these young people? So young people from anywhere between 13 to 24 years old. And the answer to that question is there is no formal process, which I came to find out back in about a year ago in Washington State. So there is no process, and we've been I've been talking to lots of people on the ground about this issue. It happens all the time, but we have come to find out there is no process, but there is something that what they call safe and appropriate exits. So basically, the grantee shall ensure that youth have safe and appropriate exits when leaving the program. Each grantee shall report data on the type of exit experienced by each young person departing from a transitional living program or a basic center. And so basically, just to define a safe and appropriate exits means settings that reflect the achievement of the intended purposes of the basic center and transitional living programs. And in the regulations that were promulgated, these were the new regulations, because the reason was a lot of youth were getting lost in the system. They were just being terminated to the streets, and they lost track of many youth. So this was a way to try and solve that problem. So basically, what they said is safe and appropriate exits are to the these are just examples of what safe and appropriate exits are. It's not definite, it's not exhaustive. It's to the private residence of a parent, guardian, another relative, or another adult that has the youth's best interest in mind, and comprise stable arrangement. To another residential program if the youth's transition to the other residential program is consistent with the youth's needs, and to an independent living if consistent with the youth's needs. And then it says safe and appropriate areas are not to the street or to a locked correctional institution or detention center if the youth became involved in activities leading to that. Or it's not to another residential program if it doesn't meet the youth's needs, or to an unknown or unspecified living situation. So we read this, and I think Katie's going to talk about some pro bono projects. We have some pro bono projects around these issues. We read this that there should be no terminations that are not safe and appropriate, and we know that that's not occurring. So we have a 50-state survey that we have been working to try and to interview people around their exit procedures, and we have a couple of other things as well. So that is that's it for me. I know it's long and dry, but so we do think that there's some really good things to do around this procedure. So I'm going to pass it to Erica. Go ahead, Erica.
Thanks, John. And I'm going to apologize in advance. You may hear my 7-month-old work partner here who's deciding that right now is when she needs to be held. So I will try and get through this as quickly as possible. My name's Erica Lopez. I use she, her pronouns. I'm located in the Albany, New York area, and I've been the communications associate for the Law Center for the last 2 years. I primarily work with the youth team, but I do some projects for the general Law Center as well. A little bit about how I came to this work. As a child, I experienced many different forms of food and housing insecurity, including homelessness with my mother. So those experiences brought me to this work and inform how I think and talk about these issues. My role on the pro bono side mainly consists of taking the various research projects from our pro bono partners and turning them into aesthetically pleasing, digestible materials for a variety of platforms and audiences. These would include directly impacted individuals, the general public, advocates, service providers, media contacts, as well as legislative and legal groups. Making the materials as accessible as possible is really important for maximizing the efficacy of the important research that our pro bono partners are doing for us and getting it in front of as many eyes as we possibly can. Sometimes that can include simplifying the language, designing an appealing graphic layout or social media visual or video, or compiling the information into a detailed but beautiful report. The hopes not only that our partners and networks will read and use these materials, but that they'll be excited to share them with their partners and their networks as well, which just expands the reach of the materials. Right now, I'm currently working on transforming the research that we received from some of our pro bono partners, detailing access to mental health services for youth and young adults in every state and DC into a downloadable report, state fact sheets, and an engaging poster with scannable QR codes that will help youth and young adults find the help and information that they need in their state. This work's being done in partnership with Alston & Bird and Aetna CVS Health. I deeply enjoy my work here at the Law Center and taking the important contributions from our pro bono partners and turning them into accessible materials so that we can increase the impact and the social returns of these incredible contributions. That's it for me, and I'm going to pass it back to Katie. Thank you all so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Erica. I'm just going to touch on two other things briefly. We do provide technical assistance for folks who reach out to us needing it. And particularly, we provide that around the rights of unhoused students. So that is something that you may occasionally throughout the course of this year see a pro bono project come up for that. And I think we actually have one on deck that I'll talk about in just a minute. The other thing is that we do is we provide state technical assistance around policy advocacy. And this, of course, is generally related to the index metrics. So oftentimes a state will take a look at their score on the state index and be like, what can we do? You know, like it seems like we're really missing pieces and parts of, you know, what we could do to best serve unhoused youth. And so we help them figure out like what that could be and how to sort of get going on that work. The other thing I just want to mention briefly, especially since this is a pro bono event, is that we have kind of a sub pro bono program that we do on the youth team called In-Housing Counsel. And that's more where we're looking for pro bono attorneys that can help the organizations that serve youth. It might not be something where you're like, we're talking about, you know, a youth client, but we're talking about like the organizations that work with youth, and they might need help with like more transactional legal issues. This was something that when we were kind of expanding the youth program at the Law Center, we heard a need from some of our partners. And so I try to often sort of point out like if a particular pro bono project that's coming out for us falls under in-housing counsel, just so it's like kind of clear, like who the client is, who the audience is. And sometimes this can give an opportunity for pro bono attorneys that might feel like uncomfortable with maybe civil rights type, you know, litigation and research. They might have a lot of great expertise in more transactional legal issues, and gives a chance to really use that expertise for the benefit of youth homelessness services. Okay, so that was just a summary of all the things that we've talked about. I think the only other thing I didn't mention is that we do also sort of monitor for litigation. So like if we're seeing an issue come up that we think might need some lawsuits filed, that is something that we're keeping in mind and always looking out for. And I think I'll just briefly share, unless there's any questions about what we presented, just kind of the pro bono projects that we have on deck right now. One is, I'd mentioned earlier that we would like to expand our state index tracking to the territories. And so we need some help with territorial research for the state index. Jeremy was kind enough to kind of compile where all those codes live. But of course, if you are an attorney who has some experience with territorial research, and particularly if you are an attorney that might have some experience with legal or technical Spanish, that could help us, particularly with the Puerto Rico research, this is the project for you. Another project we have is to create sample policies around youth compensation. There's a fantastic trend that, you know, a lot of the federal programs that John has talked about, particularly like the RIA programs, they want youth to be involved in like the leadership and the structure and the making of those programs. And those youth need to be paid. A lot of organizations, though, are not clear on what the difference is between like an employee and an independent contractor. And sometimes youth are confused, like what their status are, you know, when they're doing this kind of work. And so we had our partners at Littler were able to put together a 50-state survey of all the employee independent contractor laws, youth labor laws, whether youth can even contract in that state, put together a wonderful survey of that. And we'd like to kind of take that and see if we could come up with some sample policies that we could share with our partners. A couple research projects that we have, you know, for those of you who might be knowledgeable about and sort of involved in any section like 1983 civil rights work, knows that like the jurisprudence around private right of action to enforce federal laws has been weakened in recent years. And so we would like some help in researching around whether, like if a program is violating, you know, RIA or even things under the HALT Act, would a young person have a private right of action to sue in federal court about a violation of those laws? Similarly, a private right of action for homeless students who might not be getting their McKinney-Vento education rights as they should. We have several partners that are really active in McKinney-Vento work, on a state level, and kind of are at the point where they're like, well, what next? Like if our advocacy with like the state, state office, if that's not getting anywhere and we've gone as far as we can on the state level, is there a way to bring a lawsuit around this? And then we also have kind of a very specific potential project, which is for any Michigan barred attorneys. So if you are a Michigan barred attorney, we want to talk to you. We had a really interesting case come in about whether youth-specific housing violates Michigan's anti-discrimination laws. And I think that this would be something that analysis would be useful for other states that have age discrimination laws, because essentially like this organization is getting pushback from the city saying like, you can't say that this is a program only for 18 to 24-year-olds, even though that is 100% what that program is funded to be, because that's the HUD requirements of their particular program. So we've done some like initial research into it, and the state, like maybe it's like a matter of like a state fix or a state exception for certain things. But anyway, we could use some help of like doing a deeper dive on that particular one. And then finally, all of our various pro bono projects require regular updating. So we often are looking for folks that can help us, with some of that updating work. The state index is a big one, although we do have some automation on that now. But, that is something that we're sort of always looking for help for. So I will pause there. And here is our various social media links. Please follow us if you don't already. It's a good place to kind of find out what we're doing and what we're up to. And I think I'll pass it back to Carlton.
Thank you. No, thank you, Katie, and thank the entire youth team. If you can't tell, the youth team they bring the energy to the Law Center. The rest of us, we're a little, our energy needs to go up sometimes. So they definitely bring the energy. They do very important work, and there's a lot to cover today, and there's a lot more to cover throughout the course of the year. So please stay tuned to future HALT events. We're planning a HALT lunch again in the month of May. So once we have all the details together for that HALT lunch, we definitely will send that out, and it'll be in person in Washington, D.C. And we just, if you're around, you get the invitation. We want to encourage you to come to learn more about a lot of the work that is going on in this space. But right now, I want to take a few moments for a very important introduction. A very important member of the Law Center team, which is our new co-chair for HALT, Lauren McHale, and she is from Austin and Byrd. Austin and Byrd, if you don't remember, Cheryl Naja was one of our co-chairs last year as well. But Austin did such a great job in the role. We said we can't let him go. So we got to bring somebody from Austin right on back and sit on that seat. And she's off hitting the ground running. So I'll pass it over to her to let her introduce herself and say a few words.
Thanks, Carlton. As Carlton mentioned, I'm Lauren McHale. I work at Austin and Byrd. And I've been working with NHLC for a couple years now. I started just doing kind of, volunteer work with literature reviews, and then later took on the lead of kind of running the literature reviews. Most recently, to have the opportunity to work with Katie on the project that Erica mentioned, where Austin partnered with our good friend and client, CVS Aetna, to do a 50-state survey related to youth rights to consent to mental and medical health treatment without a parent. And I just have to say, I'm really, really excited to be in this new position, to work with HALT, and hopefully to work with all of you. So if there's anything that I can do, or if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you for all the work you've done so far. I mean, that really concludes our programming for today. Again, if you have any questions about taking on the pro bono projects, we want to invite you and encourage you to send me an email. We can kickstart that process. also just want to encourage your organization. If you're not already a member of HALT, we encourage you to consider that as well. HALT, as you know, is the Homelessness Action Legal Team. And I always say it, that it's the action piece that is important. As you just heard with Lauren and just with Austin overall, you know, we were able to work with Austin a little bit prior to them becoming HALT members, but ever since their organization has entered HALT, it's formed a much more deeper relationship, not just with the organizations, but organizations are people, right? There's people inside of those organizations, and there's Austin, there's Latham Watkins with our other co-chair, Matt Murchison, who's been graciously chairing our HALT committee for some years now and has been involved behind the scenes. Mickey Herman as well from Latham, who's been involved with HALT and /LEAP and / the Law Center for years upon years. And so that is the goal, is to really develop a deeper relationship with the organizations and the people inside of it, to educate you about the issues that the crises, not the issue, the crises that we are addressing here at the Law Center and other organizations across the country, and really being able to utilize, you know, the not just the people power and the resources that you have at your organizations, but you all have interests as well. And we want to put that to work. We want to put that to action so we can have better policy, better laws, and just ultimately create a better reality. Because again, you know, there's no reason why you should have kids, children, anybody living on the streets with nowhere to go. Right? Everybody deserves to be cared for. Everybody deserves to have, you know, especially children, having a place to call their home, where they can create memories, they can grow, they can learn and just really pursue their happiness that they need to pursue here in the United States of America and worldwide. So we just want to encourage you again. Please, if you're interested in the projects, please contact me. If you're interested in anything else about the Law Center, again, follow us on social media. As Erica put up there, we're on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, maybe on TikTok. We're everywhere, you know, where digital services are provided. Follow us on LinkedIn, or excuse me, follow us on social media, because we post a lot of things there and have a lot of engagement where with youth, and I think you'll see a different side of the Law Center there, and you'll see that excitement that I was talking about from that the youth team brings to the Law Center. So we just want to, you know, we're at 1 o'clock. That is all. I'm gonna shut my mouth for now, but again, really encourage you to reach out, talk to the people in your organizations, become a member of HALT, and let's continue this work together.